Hannah Winters stared at the weathered sign that announced, "Welcome to Timber Creek," with a mix of dread and determination, her gloved hands trembling slightly on the reins of her chestnut mare. 6 years had passed since she'd been driven from this town, her name smeared with accusations that had followed her like vultures across the Western Territories. Now, in the autumn of 1883, she was back not as the disgraced young bride who had fled in tears, but as a woman hardened by years of struggle and armed with a truth that would change everything. The town had grown in her absence. New storefronts lined the main street, their fresh paint gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Hannah adjusted her simple blue traveling dress and straightened her shoulders. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she guided her horse down the familiar dirt road that led to the center of Timber Creek. People stopped to stare. Whispers followed her like ripples in a pond. Some faces she recognized aged now, weathered by the harsh Wyoming climate and the passing years. Others were strangers, but they seemed to know her all the same, their curious eyes taking in the sight of Hannah Winters, returned from disgrace. "That's her," she heard someone hiss. "Lloyd Winters' wife, the one who—" "Hush now," another voice interrupted. "There might be children about." Hannah kept her gaze forward, her jaw set. 6 years ago, she would have cowered under their judgment. Now, she had come too far to break. The Timber Creek Hotel stood at the far end of the main street, a 3-story building that represented the town's growing prosperity. Hannah dismounted carefully, wincing slightly at the stiffness in her back from days of travel. A young stable boy rushed forward to take her horse. "Take good care of her," Hannah said, pressing a coin into his palm. "She's carried me a long way." The hotel lobby was mercifully empty save for the clerk, a bespectacled man Hannah didn't recognize. He glanced up as she approached, his expression neutral. "I'd like a room, please," Hannah said, placing her small purse on the counter. "Just for a few nights." The clerk nodded, reaching for a key. "Name for the register." Hannah hesitated only a moment. "Hannah Winters." The man's hand froze above the registration book, his eyes widening slightly. "Winters? As in—" "Yes," she interrupted. "That Hannah Winters." Word of her arrival spread through Timber Creek like wildfire. By the time Hannah had washed the dust from her face and changed into a fresh dress, it seemed the entire town knew of her return. She stood at the window of her room, watching as people gathered in small clusters on the street below, no doubt discussing her presence and speculating about her reasons for returning. Her gaze drifted to the large house on the hill that overlooked the town Lloyd Winters' home. Her home, once. The place where her life had fallen apart 6 years ago, when Lloyd had publicly accused her of infidelity and cast her out with nothing but the clothes on her back and the whispers of scandal following behind her. The accusations had been false, but who would believe a young bride of 20 over Lloyd Winters, the wealthiest cattle rancher in the county and a man 20 years her senior? No one had stood by her then. No one had known the truth. Hannah took a deep breath, her hand unconsciously moving to the locket around her neck. Inside was a small daguerreotype evidence of the secret she had carried away from Timber Creek. Evidence that would shake this town to its core. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Hannah turned, hesitating before calling out. "Who is it?" "It's Margaret Wilson, Hannah." "May I come in?" Hannah's breath caught. Margaret had been the closest thing to a friend she'd had in Timber Creek, the doctor's wife who had shown her kindness when few others did. Still, Margaret hadn't defended her when the accusations flew. No one had. She opened the door to find Margaret standing there, older now, with threads of gray in her once auburn hair. The woman's eyes were wide with disbelief. "It really is you," Margaret whispered. "When I heard, I could scarcely believe it." "It's me," Hannah confirmed, stepping aside to allow the older woman to enter. Margaret moved into the room, her gaze traveling over Hannah as if taking inventory of the changes 6 years had wrought. "You look different, stronger somehow." "Life has a way of either breaking you or forging you," Hannah replied, closing the door. "I chose not to break." Margaret nodded slowly. "Why have you come back, Hannah?" "After everything that happened, I've come back for justice," Hannah interrupted, her voice steady, "and to reveal the truth." "The truth," Margaret echoed, her brow furrowed. "About the affair." "Hannah, the whole town saw the letters, the gifts. Lloyd had evidence, fabricated evidence," Hannah said firmly. "I was never unfaithful to Lloyd, never, but he needed everyone to believe I was." Margaret looked troubled. "But why would he do such a thing? Lloyd adored you." Hannah moved to the small traveling trunk at the foot of the bed. She unlocked it and withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "Lloyd Winters is not the man this town believes him to be," she said quietly. "And I'm not the only one he's wronged." Margaret's eyes fixed on the envelope. "What is that?" "Proof," Hannah answered. "But before I reveal it, there's someone I need to see first." "Lloyd?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hannah shook her head, a grim smile touching her lips. "No, first I need to see Lucas Reed." Margaret's eyes widened. "The new marshal, Hannah, what does he have to do with any of this?" "Everything," Hannah replied, tucking the envelope back into her trunk. "He has everything to do with it." Margaret looked as though she wanted to ask more questions, but something in Hannah's expression stopped her. After a moment, she simply nodded. "Be careful, Hannah," she said softly. "This town has changed since you left, but some things remain the same. Lloyd Winters still holds considerable power here." After Margaret left, Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, fighting against the wave of memories threatening to overwhelm her. The day Lloyd had publicly accused her. The hateful words hurled her way as she rode out of town. The long, desperate journey that followed. And then, the discovery that had changed everything. As twilight settled over Timber Creek, Hannah steeled herself for what lay ahead. 6 years ago, she had fled this town in shame. Tomorrow, she would begin to reclaim her honor and, more importantly, to secure justice for the innocents caught in Lloyd Winters' web of lies. The marshal's office sat at the corner of Main Street and Pine, a sturdy building of hewn logs that had been expanded since Hannah's time in Timber Creek. A lantern burned in the window, casting a warm glow onto the wooden sidewalk outside. Hannah paused before the door, her heart racing. She had planned this moment for years, rehearsed the words she would say. Yet now that it had arrived, she found herself hesitating. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The interior was warm and smelled of coffee and pine. A man sat at a desk with his back to her, bent over paperwork. He was broad-shouldered, his brown hair touched with gold in the lamplight. "Be with you in a moment," he said without turning. Hannah closed the door behind her, the sound of the latch causing the man to look up. He turned, and Hannah found herself staring into eyes the color of a summer sky, eyes she had never forgotten. Lucas Reed froze, his pen clattering to the desktop. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a physical thing. "Hannah," he finally said, her name emerging as little more than a breath. "Hello, Lucas," she replied, willing her voice to remain steady. "It's been a long time." Lucas rose slowly from his chair, towering over the desk. He was taller than she remembered, or perhaps it was the authority that now clung to him like a second skin. The boyish ranch hand she had known was gone, replaced by a man whose eyes held both strength and shadows. 6 years, he said, his voice low and controlled. Not long enough for some in this town. Hannah felt the sting of his words but refused to flinch. "I didn't come back for them. I came back for the truth." Something flickered across Lucas's face, surprise, perhaps, or wariness. Truth has a way of getting twisted in Timber Creek. You should know that better than most. Which is why I've come to you first, Hannah said, taking a step forward. You're the law now. I need your help. Lucas studied her, his expression unreadable. Last I heard, you were the one who broke the law, Hannah. Adultery might not land you in jail, but it's still a sin in these parts. Hannah met his gaze unflinchingly. I never committed adultery, Lucas. Not with Daniel Quinn, not with anyone. Those were lies Lloyd created to get rid of me. Lucas crossed his arms over his chest. And you expect me to believe that now, after all this time, when the whole town saw the evidence with their own eyes? I expect you to listen, Hannah countered. Because what I have to say doesn't just concern me, it concerns a child. The word hung between them like a thunderclap. Lucas's arms slowly uncrossed, his brow furrowing. A child, he repeated. Hannah nodded, her throat tight. My daughter, 5 years old now, born 7 months after I left Timber Creek. Lucas braced his hands against the desk, his knuckles whitening. You're saying Lloyd cast me out knowing I was with child, Hannah confirmed. He wanted no part of her, said she couldn't be his. And was she? Lucas asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. His, I mean. Hannah held his gaze, allowing the full weight of the truth to settle between them. No, she wasn't Lloyd's child. She couldn't have been. Lucas sank back into his chair, understanding dawning in his eyes. Because Lloyd couldn't have children. Yes, Hannah said simply. He was unable to father children. He had known it for years before he married me, but he kept it secret. When I told him I was expecting, he accused me of betraying him. He couldn't accept that the miracle we had both prayed for had actually happened. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, processing her words. If Lloyd couldn't father children, then who? My daughter's father was a good man, Hannah interrupted. Someone who showed me kindness when I needed it most. Someone who deserved to know he had a child in this world. Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes, followed quickly by disbelief. Hannah, are you saying her name is Lily? Hannah said softly. She has your eyes, Lucas. Your smile, too. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas stared at her, shock etched into every line of his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. You're telling me I have a daughter, a 5-year-old daughter I've never met. He rose from his chair again, agitation evident in every movement. How is that possible? It was just that one time the night before you married Lloyd. Hannah nodded, the memory of that night rushing back, their chance meeting by the creek, the confessions of feelings long held secret, the desperate knowledge that come morning she would belong to another man. It had been a moment of weakness, of love, of goodbye. One time is all it takes, she said softly. Lucas braced himself against the desk, his head bowed. All these years. Why didn't you tell me? Why come back now? I tried to write to you after she was born, Hannah explained. The letters came back unopened. I later learned you had left Timber Creek, joined the Rangers over in Texas. By the time I discovered you had returned as Marshal here, Lily was already 3 years old. And now? Lucas asked, looking up at her with eyes that held a storm of emotions. Why return and risk everything? Lloyd will deny it all. He'll turn the town against you again. Hannah reached into her pocket and withdrew the locket. She opened it carefully, revealing the tiny portrait within, a little girl with golden curls and eyes as blue as a summer sky. Lucas's eyes. For her, Hannah said simply. Lloyd Winters robbed me of my good name, my home, and nearly my will to live. I won't let him rob Lily of her birthright or her father. She deserves to know where she comes from, Lucas. She deserves the truth. Lucas took the locket with trembling hands, his gaze fixed on the small face within. She's beautiful, he whispered. She's smart too, Hannah said, a smile touching her lips for the first time. Stubborn as a mule, reminds me of someone I used to know. Lucas looked up, a question in his eyes. "Where is she now?" "Safe," Hannah assured him, "with friends in Laramie. I couldn't bring her here until I knew. Until I was certain you would want to know her." "Of course I want to know her," Lucas said, his voice stronger now. "She's my child, Hannah. My daughter." He closed the locket carefully, returning it to her outstretched hand. "But Lloyd won't take this lying down. When he learns you're back, he already knows," Hannah interrupted. "Word travels fast in small towns. I imagine he's planning his next move even as we speak." Lucas straightened, resolve settling over his features. "Then we need to be ready. If what you're saying is true, if Lloyd fabricated evidence to accuse you falsely, that's a serious matter. And if he knew about his condition before marrying you, I have proof," Hannah said. "Documentation from a doctor in Denver who treated Lloyd years before our marriage. Lloyd confessed everything the night he cast me out. He never expected me to return, never thought I would dare to challenge him." Lucas studied her for a long moment. "You've changed, Hannah. The woman I knew 6 years ago would never have taken on Lloyd Winters." "The woman you knew died the day she was driven from her home," Hannah replied. "But she found something worth living for, worth fighting for." She met his gaze steadily. "Will you help us, Lucas? Will you stand with me when I confront Lloyd?" Lucas moved around the desk until he stood directly before her. Gently, he took her hands in his. "I'll do more than stand with you," he promised. "I'll fight for you, for both of you, whatever it takes." For the first time in 6 years, Hannah felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't alone anymore. Whatever came next, she would face it with Lucas beside her. What neither of them realized was that across town, in the grand house on the hill, Lloyd Winters was already making plans of his own plans that would test them both in ways they couldn't imagine. Dawn broke over Timber Creek with a golden brilliance that belied the tension simmering beneath the town's peaceful surface. Hannah awoke early, having slept fitfully through the night. The knowledge that Lloyd was aware of her return had kept her tossing and turning, her mind racing through all possible scenarios. She dressed carefully in her finest dress, a modest navy blue gown with white trim that she had painstakingly sewn during the long evenings of the past winter. It wasn't fashionable by Eastern standards, but it was neat and respectable. Today of all days, she needed to present herself as a woman of dignity, not as the fallen woman Lloyd had painted her to be. A knock sounded at her door just as she finished pinning her hair. Hannah opened it to find Lucas standing in the hallway, his marshal's badge gleaming on his chest, his expression somber. "You're ready," he observed, his eyes taking in her appearance. "As ready as I'll ever be," Hannah replied, reaching for her shawl. Lucas hesitated. "There's something you should know before we proceed. Lloyd didn't spend the night at home. According to my deputy, he rode out yesterday evening after hearing of your arrival. Returned before dawn with company." Hannah's hand stilled on the shawl. "What kind of company?" "Daniel Quinn," Lucas said quietly. The name hit Hannah like a physical blow. Daniel Quinn had been the man Lloyd accused her of being unfaithful with, a charming cattle buyer from Kansas City who had stayed in Timber Creek for several weeks before her expulsion. The alleged letters between them, the gifts Quinn had supposedly given her, had been the evidence Lloyd presented to the town. "Quinn was never more than an acquaintance," Hannah said, her voice tight. "I spoke with him perhaps 3 times, always in Lloyd's presence." "I believe you," Lucas assured her. "But Lloyd bringing him back now, after all these years, it's a calculated move." Hannah nodded, understanding. "He's reinforcing the original lie, making sure Quinn corroborates his story." "That would be my guess," Lucas agreed. "We need to be prepared for that possibility." Hannah squared her shoulders. "Then we'll face them both. The truth doesn't change just because they align their lies." They walked together down the main street, aware of the eyes following their progress from windows and doorways. Word had spread that Marshal Reed was escorting Hannah Winters to confront her former husband, and it seemed the entire town was holding its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. The Winters mansion stood like a fortress atop the gentle hill overlooking Timber Creek. Built with the proceeds from Lloyd's cattle empire, it was a testament to wealth and power, a three-story Victorian monstrosity with gabled windows and a wraparound porch. Hannah had once thought it beautiful. Now, it seemed to loom over them like a threat. A stable hand took notice of their approach and disappeared inside, presumably to alert his master. By the time Hannah and Lucas reached the front steps, the massive oak door swung open to reveal Lloyd Winters himself. At 53, Lloyd was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and beard. His eyes, cold and gray as winter storm clouds, fixed on Hannah with a mixture of contempt and something else, something that might have been fear, quickly masked. "Well, well," he drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "The prodigal wife returns, and with the town marshal as escort, no less. To what do I owe this unexpected reunion, Hannah?" Hannah met his gaze steadily. "I think you know why I'm here, Lloyd." Lloyd's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Enlighten me." "Perhaps we could discuss this inside," Lucas suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Lloyd's gaze shifted to Lucas, hardening. "Marshal Reed, I wasn't aware that escorting adulterous women fell under your official duties." Lucas didn't rise to the bait. "This is a matter that concerns justice, Mr. Winters. I believe it would be in everyone's best interest to handle it privately rather than on your front porch where curious ears might overhear." Lloyd considered them for a long moment before stepping aside. "By all means, then, enter. We have nothing to hide in this house." The interior of the mansion was just as Hannah remembered, opulent, cold, a showcase of wealth rather than a home. The grand foyer, with its marble floor and sweeping staircase, led to a formal parlor where another man waited, standing by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey in hand, despite the early hour. Daniel Quinn had aged well in the intervening years. His once black hair now held distinguished streaks of silver at the temples, and his tailored suit spoke of continued prosperity. He turned as they entered, his practiced smile faltering slightly at the sight of Hannah. "Mrs. Winters," he greeted her, recovering quickly. "This is unexpected." "It's Miss Porter now," Hannah corrected him, reverting to her maiden name. "Though I doubt my presence is as unexpected as you claim, Mr. Quinn, considering Lloyd summoned you here specifically to counter what I've come to say." Quinn glanced at Lloyd, who motioned for everyone to sit. Hannah chose an armchair near the window, while Lucas remained standing behind her, a silent sentinel. "You always were perceptive," Lloyd remarked, pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "That was one of the qualities that attracted me to you, Hannah. Your quick mind. Your ability to see what others missed." He settled into his chair across from her. "Unfortunately, those same qualities made you dangerous." "Dangerous," Hannah repeated. "Is that how you justify what you did?" "Casting me out, destroying my reputation, separating me from—" She stopped, glancing at Quinn. Lloyd's eyes narrowed. "From what, Hannah? What did I separate you from, besides the life of luxury you clearly didn't deserve?" Hannah exchanged a look with Lucas, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. "From my child," she said quietly. "Our child." Lloyd's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Still clinging to that fantasy, I see. There was no child, Hannah, at least none of mine." "Actually, there was a child," Hannah countered. "A daughter, born 7 months after you drove me from Timber Creek." Quinn shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing between them. Lloyd's face darkened. If you bore a child, it was Quinn's, he spat. Or some other man's, not mine, never mine. We both know why it couldn't have been yours, Hannah said steadily. But it wasn't Daniel Quinn's either. I never was unfaithful to you, Lloyd. Not with him, not with anyone. Lloyd slammed his glass down on the side table. You expect me to believe that? When I found the letters, the brooch he gave you hidden among your things. Letters I never wrote, Hannah replied. A brooch I never received, fabrications, all of it. Quinn cleared his throat. Mrs. Winters, Miss Porter, I don't know what game you're playing, but I distinctly recall our correspondence. The moments we shared when your husband was away on business. Moments that never happened, Hannah contradicted him. Tell me, Mr. Quinn, how much did Lloyd pay you to lie then? How much is he paying you now? Quinn's face flushed, but before he could respond, Lucas stepped forward. I think it's time we laid all our cards on the table, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his authority. Miss Porter has returned to Timber Creek with evidence that Mr. Winters knowingly entered into a marriage under false pretenses, then fabricated evidence of adultery to dissolve that marriage when it became inconvenient. Lloyd rose from his chair, his face contorted with rage. How dare you come into my home and make these accusations? I took Hannah as my wife in good faith. She betrayed me, as the entire town witnessed. The town witnessed what you wanted them to see, Hannah said, rising to meet him, just as they'll now see the truth. She withdrew an envelope from her reticule. This is a medical report from Dr. James Montgomery of Denver, dated 1873, 3 years before our marriage. It confirms that due to an injury sustained in your youth, you are incapable of fathering children. Lloyd's face went ashen. Where did you get that? From Dr. Montgomery himself, Hannah replied. It seems he kept meticulous records, and he remembered you quite clearly. He also remembered advising you to be honest with any prospective bride about your condition. Lucas took a step closer to Lloyd. You knew you couldn't give Hannah children, yet you married her anyway without disclosing this fact. When she became pregnant, a medical impossibility, if she had been faithful only to you, you accused her of adultery rather than face the possibility that a miracle had occurred or that your condition had somehow resolved itself. There are no miracles in medicine, Lloyd snarled. If she was pregnant, it was because she had lain with another man. Yes, Hannah agreed quietly, but not Daniel Quinn, not during our marriage, and I have proof of that as well. She reached again into her reticule, withdrawing the locket. She opened it, revealing the portrait of Lily, and held it out for both men to see. This is my daughter, she said. Look at her eyes, Lloyd. Look at her features. Then look at Marshal Reed. Even you cannot deny the resemblance. Lloyd stared at the locket, then at Lucas, comprehension dawning on his face. You, he breathed. It was you all along. Quinn looked confused, glancing between Lucas and Hannah. I don't understand. What does the marshal have to do with this? Lucas is Lily's father, Hannah explained, her voice steady. We were close before my marriage to Lloyd. It happened only once, the night before my wedding, a moment of weakness that resulted in the greatest blessing of my life. Lloyd's laugh was hollow. So you admit to coming to my marriage bed already carrying another man's child, and you expect sympathy. I didn't know I was with child when we married, Hannah countered. And when I discovered it, I truly believed the child was yours, a miracle we had both prayed for. It was only after you cast me out, after Lily was born and I saw Lucas in her features, that I understood the truth. Lloyd turned away, moving to the window where he stood silently for a long moment, his back to them. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, dangerous. What exactly do you want, Hannah? Money? Recognition? To destroy the life I've built in this town, Justice, Hannah replied simply. I want my good name restored. I want the truth known that I was never unfaithful during our marriage, and I want you to acknowledge publicly that you lied." Lloyd turned back to face her, his expression calculating. "And if I refuse?" Lucas stepped forward. "Then Miss Porter will file formal charges against you for fraud and defamation. Mr. Quinn here will face charges as an accomplice. The medical report will become public record, as will testimony from several witnesses who can attest to Miss Porter's character and to certain inconsistencies in your accusations." Quinn set down his glass, his confidence visibly shaken. "Lloyd, you assured me this was a simple matter of confirming what we established years ago. You never mentioned anything about medical reports or children." "Be quiet, Daniel," Lloyd snapped. "I think Mr. Quinn has the right idea," Lucas said mildly. "Distance himself from this situation before it grows worse. The truth has a way of emerging, Mr. Winters, no matter how deeply it's buried." Lloyd's gaze moved from Lucas to Hannah, calculation written in every line of his face. "And the child, what do you want for her?" "Nothing from you," Hannah assured him. "Lily has a father who wants to know her. She needs nothing from Lloyd Winters." Lloyd's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "How convenient for all of you." The disgraced wife returns, vindicated by the town's marshal who conveniently happens to be the father of her child. A touching story, almost too perfect. "Not perfect," Hannah corrected him. "Far from it, but true nonetheless." Lloyd moved to the sideboard, refilling his glass with trembling hands. "You realize, of course, that your word against mine means little in this town. I've built Timber Creek. These people respect me, depend on me for their livelihoods." "They respected my father too," Lucas said quietly. Judge Reed was known throughout the territory as a man of impeccable integrity. His name still carries weight, even 5 years after his passing. When he hears that his only son has a daughter he's never met because of your machinations, "Your father is dead," Lloyd interrupted. "My father is very much alive," Lucas contradicted him. "Retired to his ranch outside of Cheyenne, but still sharp as ever and still connected to every judge and lawman in 3 territories." Lloyd's expression faltered. It was clear he had believed Judge Reed dead, a miscalculation that now threatened his carefully constructed narrative. "This isn't just about Hannah anymore," Lucas continued. "It's about my daughter, a child who deserves to know her family, her heritage. I won't allow your lies to stand between us any longer." Quinn moved toward the door. "I believe I've heard enough. Lloyd, I'll be at the hotel when you decide how you want to proceed with this situation." After Quinn departed, a heavy silence fell over the parlor. Lloyd stared into his glass, his mind clearly working through his limited options. "One public statement," he finally said. "Acknowledging that I may have been hasty in my accusations against you. That new evidence has come to light suggesting you were not unfaithful during our marriage. Nothing about my condition. Nothing about Reed or the child." Hannah shook her head. "Not enough, Lloyd. The entire town witnessed my humiliation. They need to know the full truth." "The full truth ruins me," Lloyd growled. "Your lies ruined me," Hannah countered. "For 6 years, I've lived with the shame you heaped upon me. I've raised our daughter. She is not our daughter." "I've raised my daughter," Hannah amended, "in poverty and hardship because you couldn't bear the thought that you weren't perfect. That's the real reason you drove me away, isn't it? Not because you truly believed I had been unfaithful, but because my pregnancy was living proof of your inadequacy." Lloyd flinched as if she had struck him. For a moment, the facade cracked, revealing the insecurity beneath his arrogance. "What would you have had me do?" he asked, his voice suddenly tired. "Stand before the town and admit I couldn't give my young wife a child, become an object of pity and mockery." You could have trusted me, Hannah said softly. We could have faced it together. Instead, you chose to destroy me rather than risk your pride. Lloyd set down his glass, his shoulders sagging. It's too late for such sentiments now. It's not too late for the truth, Lucas said firmly. Here's what's going to happen, Winters. Tomorrow morning, you'll make a public statement in front of the town hall. You'll retract your accusations against Hannah and admit you had no evidence of infidelity. You'll acknowledge that you made a grievous error in judgment that resulted in her unjust exile from Timber Creek. And in return, Lloyd asked, a shrewd look returning to his eyes. In return, the specific details of your medical condition remain private, Lucas replied. Hannah's reputation is restored and we all move forward from there. Lloyd considered this for a long moment before nodding slowly. Very well. Tomorrow at noon, I'll make your statement. His gaze shifted to Hannah, cold and assessing. I underestimated you, it seems. The girl I married would never have found the courage to return and face me. The girl you married died the day you cast her out, Hannah replied quietly, but the woman who returned is stronger for the journey. As they left the Winters mansion, Hannah felt a curious lightness in her chest. 6 years of carrying the burden of Lloyd's lies, of fighting to survive, of building a life for herself and Lily against impossible odds, all of it had led to this moment of vindication. Lucas walked beside her in silence until they reached the bottom of the hill. There, out of sight of the mansion's windows, he stopped and turned to face her. I should have looked for you, he said, regret etched into his features. When you left town, I should have followed. I knew Lloyd's accusations didn't align with the Hannah I knew, but I was young and foolish. By the time I gathered the courage to question the narrative, you were long gone. Hannah shook her head. We were both young, Lucas, both making the best decisions we could with what we knew at the time. I have a daughter, he said, wonder coloring his voice. A 5-year-old daughter I've never met. Hannah smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. And she has been asking about her father since she learned to speak. Where is my papa? What does he look like? Will he like me? When can I meet her? Lucas asked, his voice rough with emotion. Soon, Hannah promised. Once Lloyd makes his statement and the town's initial furor dies down, I'll send for her. She's eager to see the place her mother has told her so many stories about. Lucas reached out, hesitantly taking Hannah's hand in his. And what about us, Hannah? Where do we stand? Hannah looked down at their joined hands, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. I don't know, she admitted honestly. 6 years is a long time, Lucas. We're different people now. Different, yes, he agreed. But some things remain the same. His eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering. I never stopped loving you, Hannah. Not when you married Lloyd, not when you left town, not in all the years since. Hannah's heart quickened at his words. Lucas, I'm not asking for promises, he interrupted gently. Only a chance. A chance to know you again, to know our daughter, to see if what we felt for each other back then can grow into something stronger, something lasting. Hannah thought of the lonely years behind her, of the nights she had lain awake wondering what might have been. She thought of Lily, with her father's blue eyes and stubborn determination. And she thought of the man standing before her now, no longer the impulsive ranch hand who had stolen her heart, but a man who had built a life of honor and service. A chance, she agreed softly. We all deserve that much. Lucas smiled, relief washing over his features. As they continued toward town, he kept her hand in his, a simple gesture that spoke volumes to any who might be watching. Hannah Winters had returned to Timber Creek not as a penitent seeking forgiveness, but as a woman claiming justice, and perhaps, if fate was kind, a second chance at love. By evening, the news of Hannah's confrontation with Lloyd had spread throughout Timber Creek. The town buzzed with speculation, with some siding firmly with Lloyd and others beginning to question the story they had accepted for 6 years. Hannah kept to her room at the hotel, aware that curious eyes followed her every movement when she ventured into the hallway. Lucas joined her for dinner in a private corner of the hotel restaurant, ignoring the whispers that followed them. As they ate, he filled her in on his life during the years of their separation, his time with the Texas Rangers, his return to Timber Creek upon hearing of his father's illness, his appointment as marshal after the previous one retired. "And you never married?" Hannah asked, curious despite herself. Lucas shook his head. There were opportunities, women who made their interest known, but something always held me back. His gaze met hers across the table, or someone. Hannah looked down at her plate, a blush rising to her cheeks. "I thought of you too," she admitted. "Especially after Lily was born. She has your temperament, stubborn, principled, with a streak of mischief that keeps me on my toes." Lucas chuckled. "Sounds familiar. My father would say she comes by it honestly." "Your father," Hannah said, remembering. "How will he react to the news that he has a granddaughter?" "With joy," Lucas assured her. "He always liked you, you know, said you had spirit. He was furious when Lloyd accused you, convinced there was more to the story than what was being told." "A wise man," Hannah murmured. "He'll want to meet Lily as soon as possible," Lucas continued. "Once we get through tomorrow's ordeal, perhaps we could all take a trip to Cheyenne together." The casual way he included her in his plans, the easy assumption that they would face whatever came next as a united front, warmed Hannah in ways she hadn't expected. For so long, she had been alone, making decisions for herself and Lily without anyone to share the burden. The prospect of partnership of family was both thrilling and terrifying. As they finished their meal, Lucas leaned forward, his expression serious. "Hannah, there's something we need to discuss. About Lloyd." Hannah tensed slightly. "What about him?" "I don't trust his acquiescence," Lucas said, keeping his voice low. "It came too easily. Lloyd Winters is not a man who admits defeat, especially not in such a public manner." Hannah nodded slowly. "I had the same thought. He's planning something. Which is why I've arranged for a deputy to keep watch on the mansion tonight," Lucas explained. "And why I'd like you to consider staying at my home instead of the hotel. It's on the edge of town, more defensible if Lloyd decides to take matters into his own hands." Hannah hesitated. "Lucas, I appreciate your concern, but people will talk." "People are already talking," he pointed out. "And I have a spare room with a lock on the door. Your reputation will remain intact." After a moment's consideration, Hannah agreed. They finished their meal and slipped out the back entrance of the hotel to avoid prying eyes. Lucas's home was a modest cabin at the eastern edge of Timber Creek, surrounded by pine trees that provided both shade and privacy. It was simply furnished but neat, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area and 2 small bedrooms off to one side. "It's not much," Lucas said as he lit the lamps, "but it's home." Hannah looked around, taking in the bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes, the comfortable chairs by the hearth, the photographs on the mantel. It was a bachelor's home, but one that spoke of permanence and care. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "Much more a home than Lloyd's mansion ever was." Lucas showed her to the spare room, which was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand. "I'll be just across the hall if you need anything," he assured her, stepping back to give her space. Hannah set her small traveling bag on the bed, suddenly acutely aware of their solitude. This was the first time they had been truly alone together since that fateful night 6 years ago. The memory of it hung between them, unspoken but undeniably present. "Lucas," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. He waited, his gaze steady on hers. "Thank you," she finally said. for believing me, for standing with me. Not everyone would have." "I should have done it 6 years ago," he replied, regret coloring his voice. "I won't fail you again, Hannah, or Lily." The mention of their daughter seemed to ease the tension, grounding them both in the reality of their situation. This wasn't about rekindling old passions. It was about forging a path forward for the sake of a child who deserved to know both her parents. "Get some rest," Lucas advised gently. "Tomorrow will be challenging enough without adding exhaustion to the mix." Hannah nodded, and with a final lingering look, Lucas left her to her privacy. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds of Lucas moving about in the main room, banking the fire, checking the locks on the doors and windows, settling into a routine that spoke of years living alone. Eventually, the cabin fell silent. Hannah lay back against the pillows, her mind racing with thoughts of the confrontation to come. Would Lloyd honor his word? Would the town believe the truth after 6 years of accepting his lies? And what of her future with Lucas and Lily? Could they build a life here in Timber Creek? Or would the shadow of scandal always hang over them? Sleep eluded her for hours, but when it finally came, it brought dreams of a little girl with blue eyes running through a meadow, laughing as Lucas chased her, the three of them together in the sunlight, free from the shadows of the past. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the pines outside Hannah's window. She dressed carefully in the same blue dress she had worn the day before, her only good gown, and pinned her hair with meticulous attention. Today of all days, she needed to present an image of dignity and composure. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Lucas already awake and dressed in his marshal's uniform, his badge polished to a shine. He looked up from the stove where he was preparing breakfast, his face brightening at the sight of her. "You slept well, I hope?" he inquired, setting a plate of eggs and bacon on the table. "Well enough," Hannah replied, taking a seat. "Any word from town?" Lucas shook his head. Deputy Simmons reported that Lloyd remained at home all night. Quinn is still at the hotel. The town's in a state of anticipation. News of Lloyd's impending statement has spread like wildfire. They ate in companionable silence, both lost in thoughts of what the day might bring. When they finished, Lucas cleared the dishes while Hannah put on her bonnet and gloves. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Hannah took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked into town together, the morning sun warming their backs. People stopped to stare as they passed, some nodding cautiously, others turning away with disapproving frowns. Hannah held her head high, drawing strength from Lucas's solid presence beside her. The town hall stood at the center of Timber Creek, a 2-story brick building that served as the hub of civic life. Already, a crowd had begun to gather in the open square before it, drawn by the promise of spectacle. Hannah spotted familiar faces among them: Margaret Wilson, who offered a tentative smile; Reverend Clark, who watched with concerned eyes; shopkeepers and ranchers and their wives, all waiting to witness the next chapter in a scandal that had entertained the town for years. "There's Quinn," Lucas murmured, nodding toward the hotel steps where Daniel Quinn stood smoking a cigar, his expression inscrutable. Hannah felt a flicker of anxiety. "Do you think he'll contradict Lloyd's statement?" "Not if he values his business relationships in this territory," Lucas replied. "Quinn may have been willing to lie for Lloyd once, but now that the truth is emerging, he'll protect his own interests first." They took up position near the front of the gathering crowd, directly before the town hall steps. The murmurs around them intensified as people noticed Hannah's presence, speculation running rampant. Hannah kept her gaze fixed on the town hall doors, refusing to acknowledge the whispers. At precisely noon, the doors opened, and Lloyd Winters emerged. He was impeccably dressed in a black suit, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed, his bearing regal. If he was nervous about the ordeal ahead, he showed no sign of it. Behind him came Mayor Thompson, a portly man who had always been one of Lloyd's staunchest allies. The crowd fell silent as Lloyd took his place at the top of the steps. His gaze swept over the assembled townspeople before coming to rest on Hannah, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his features. "Citizens of Timber Creek," he began, his voice carrying easily across the square. "I have called you here today to address a matter of some delicacy. 6 years ago, I stood before many of you and made accusations of a serious nature against my then-wife, Hannah Winters." He paused, allowing his words to settle over the crowd. Hannah felt Lucas tense beside her. "At that time," Lloyd continued, "I believed those accusations to be justified. I presented what I considered to be evidence of infidelity, and based on that evidence, I dissolved our marriage and sent Hannah from Timber Creek." Another pause. Hannah held her breath. "Yesterday, Hannah returned to Timber Creek, accompanied by our esteemed Marshal Reed. She brought with her documentation that calls into question the validity of my accusations." A murmur ran through the crowd. Lloyd raised a hand for silence. "After careful consideration, and in consultation with Mayor Thompson and other respected citizens, I have come to recognize that I may have acted hastily in this matter. The evidence I presented 6 years ago was circumstantial at best, and I now acknowledge that Hannah may not have been unfaithful during our marriage." The murmurs grew louder. Hannah could scarcely believe her ears. Lloyd was actually following through with his promise, though he was carefully parsing his words to minimize his own culpability. "In light of this realization," Lloyd continued, "I wish to publicly withdraw my accusations against Hannah Porter, formerly Winters, and to express my regret for any hardship these accusations may have caused her." Hannah felt a wave of emotion wash over her: relief, vindication, a strange sort of grief for the years lost to Lloyd's lies. Lucas's hand found hers, squeezing gently in support. "Furthermore," Lloyd added, his voice taking on a practiced tone of magnanimity, "as a gesture of goodwill and in recognition of the difficulties Hannah has endured, I am establishing a trust in her name with the Timber Creek Bank. This trust, in the amount of $5,000, is to be used as she sees fit, with no obligations or conditions attached." Gasps rippled through the crowd. $5,000 was a small fortune in Timber Creek, more than most families saw in a decade. "That's not part of our agreement," Lucas muttered under his breath. "No," Hannah agreed quietly. "He's trying to buy my silence." Lloyd's gaze found hers again, a challenge in his eyes. "I trust this gesture demonstrates the sincerity of my regret and my desire to right any wrongs that may have occurred." With that, he stepped back, clearly considering his duty fulfilled. Mayor Thompson moved forward, his expression solemn. "Citizens of Timber Creek," the mayor announced, "I believe we owe Miss Porter an apology for the treatment she received at our hands. Let us demonstrate the true character of our community by welcoming her back among us with the respect and kindness she deserves." A smattering of applause followed this pronouncement, tentative at first but growing stronger. Hannah stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in public sentiment. After 6 years of being the villain in Timber Creek's collective narrative, she was being recast as the wronged heroine. It was a validation she had dreamed of but never truly expected to receive. Lucas leaned close to her ear. "Are you all right?" Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached her, some to offer awkward apologies, others to welcome her back. A few simply to satisfy their curiosity about the woman who had dared to challenge Lloyd Winters and emerged victorious. Through it all, Lucas remained at her side, a steadfast presence that grounded her amidst the swirl of emotions. When the last well-wisher had departed, Lloyd descended the steps to where Hannah and Lucas waited. "I've kept my word," he said without preamble. "Your reputation is restored. The money is real papers will be drawn up this afternoon." "I don't want your money, Lloyd," Hannah replied. "I came for the truth, not for profit." Lloyd's smile was cold. "Consider it compensation for 6 years of hardship, or if you prefer, a dowry for your daughter. Either way, it's yours." "Why the sudden generosity?" Lucas asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Lloyd shrugged. "Perhaps I've grown sentimental in my advancing years, or perhaps I simply wish to close this chapter definitively and move forward without lingering obligations." His gaze shifted to Hannah. "You have what you came for, Hannah. I suggest you take your victory and make a life elsewhere. Timber Creek holds too many memories for both of us." With that, he turned and walked away, his back straight, his dignity intact despite the public retraction. Hannah watched him go, a complex mixture of emotions churning within her. "He's right about one thing," she said softly. "I do have what I came for. My name is cleared. Lily can hold her head high when she learns of her mother's past." Lucas studied her face. But it feels incomplete somehow," Hannah admitted. "As if something remains unresolved." Lucas nodded his understanding. "The truth has been acknowledged, but not the full truth." Lloyd admitted he was wrong, but not why he was wrong or how he knew it. "Exactly," Hannah sighed. "Still, it's more than I dared hope for when I returned to Timber Creek." They began walking back toward Lucas's cabin, the events of the morning settling between them like dust after a storm. "What will you do now?" Lucas asked. "About Lloyd's offer, I mean." Hannah considered the question carefully. "I won't reject it outright. That money could secure Lily's future, provide for her education, but I won't be bought off either. Lloyd needs to understand that clearing my name doesn't erase the harm he caused." "And what about your future?" Lucas pressed gently. "Will you stay in Timber Creek or take Lloyd's advice and start fresh elsewhere?" Hannah stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "That depends," she said, her voice soft but steady. "On what?" "On you," Hannah replied honestly. "On whether there's a place for Lily and me in your life. On whether what we once felt for each other can be rebuilt into something stronger, something lasting." Lucas's expression softened, the reserve he had maintained throughout the public confrontation melting away. "Hannah, from the moment you walked into my office, I've been trying to find the words to tell you what's in my heart. I never stopped loving you, not when you married Lloyd, not when you left town, not during all the years between. Learning about Lily only deepens that love." He took her hands in his, heedless of who might be watching. "Stay in Timber Creek. Let me know my daughter. Let us see if what we feel for each other now is strong enough to build a life upon. That's all I ask." Hannah looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the hope, the love that had somehow endured through years of separation and misunderstanding. She thought of Lily, who deserved to know her father, to have the family that circumstances had denied her. And she thought of herself, of the lonely years behind her and the possibility of happiness that now lay before her. "Yes," she said simply, "I'll stay." Lucas's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Gently, mindful of their public setting, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, a promise of more to come when they were away from prying eyes. "Then let's send for Lily," he said. "Let's bring our daughter home." 3 days later, Hannah stood on the train platform, her heart racing with anticipation. Beside her, Lucas shifted from foot to foot, betraying his own nervous energy. "What if she doesn't like me?" he asked, not for the first time. Hannah smiled, finding his anxiety endearing. "She'll adore you, Lucas. She's been dreaming of her father her entire life." "I've never been anyone's father before," he admitted. "I'm not sure I know how." "You'll learn together," Hannah assured him. "Just as I had to learn to be a mother." The distant whistle of the approaching train cut through the air, sending a shiver of excitement through both of them. Hannah smoothed her skirts, grateful for the new dress. Lucas had insisted on buying her a pretty green calico that complemented her eyes and fit better than any garment she had owned in years. As the train pulled into the station, belching steam and smoke, Hannah scanned the windows for a glimpse of familiar faces. The Blackwoods, her friends from Laramie who had agreed to escort Lily to Timber Creek, had promised to have her at the window so she could see her mother waiting. And then, there she was, a small face pressed against the glass, golden curls framing features alight with excitement. Lily spotted her mother and waved frantically, her smile wide enough to split her face. Hannah waved back, tears springing to her eyes. Beside her, Lucas stood transfixed, seeing his daughter in the flesh for the first time. "She has your smile," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "And your eyes," Hannah replied. "Wait until you see them up close." The train wheezed to a stop and passengers began to disembark. Hannah spotted Mrs. Blackwood guiding Lily down the steps, holding tightly to the little girl's hand to prevent her from running ahead in her excitement. The moment Lily's feet touched the platform, she broke free, racing toward her mother with arms outstretched. "Mama! Mama!" Hannah knelt to catch her, gathering her daughter into a fierce embrace. "Oh, my darling, I've missed you so much." Lily hugged her tightly, then pulled back, her gaze shifting curiously to the tall man standing beside her mother. She studied him with solemn intensity, taking in his badge, his kind face, his eyes that matched her own. "Are you my papa?" she asked directly in the forthright manner of children. Lucas knelt down to her level, his hat in his hands, his expression a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Yes, Lily," he said softly. "I'm your father." Lily continued to study him, her head tilted slightly as if comparing him to some image she had held in her mind. "Mama said you were brave and strong and that you help people who are in trouble." "Your mama is very kind," Lucas replied, his voice gentle. "I try to help people. That's what a marshal does." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. Then, with the simple acceptance that only children can manage, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you, Papa." Lucas's arms came around her, his eyes closing briefly as he held his daughter for the first time. Over Lily's head, his gaze met Hannah's, a world of emotion passing between them. Mrs. Blackwood approached, smiling at the tableau before her. She talked of nothing else for the entire journey, she told Hannah. Her papa the marshal, how brave he must be, how he would teach her to ride a horse and shoot a gun. Lucas chuckled, rising with Lily still in his arms. Riding, certainly. Shooting might have to wait a few years. "But Papa," Lily protested, "how will I catch bad men if I can't shoot?" "Is that what you want to do, catch bad men?" Lucas asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. Lily nodded solemnly. "Like you. Mama says I'm just like you." "God help us all," Hannah murmured, though her smile belied any real concern. After thanking the Blackwoods for their assistance and promising to visit when next in Laramie, Hannah and Lucas walked with Lily between them toward Lucas's cabin. Lily chattered excitedly, pointing out every horse, dog, and interesting storefront along the way, her earlier shyness forgotten in the joy of reunion. As they passed the general store, Margaret Wilson emerged, her eyes widening at the sight of them together, Hannah, Lucas, and the little girl whose resemblance to both was unmistakable. "Hannah," she called, approaching with a warm smile. "This must be Lily." Hannah nodded, making the introductions. Margaret bent to greet Lily, who responded with the polite manners Hannah had instilled in her. "She's beautiful," Margaret said, straightening. "She has your chin, Hannah, and Marshal Reed's eyes." She glanced between them, a question in her gaze. "Lucas is Lily's father," Hannah confirmed quietly. "We've explained everything to her." Margaret nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "I see. Well, she's a fortunate girl to have two parents who clearly adore her." She touched Hannah's arm gently. "The town is talking, of course, but more with admiration than censure. You stood up to Lloyd Winters, and one that earns respect in these parts." "And what of Lloyd?" Hannah asked. "Has he made any public appearances since his statement?" Margaret shook her head. "He's kept to himself. Some say he's planning an extended trip to Denver. Others think he might sell his holdings here and move east permanently." "Good riddance," Lucas muttered, then glanced down at Lily and added, "Pardon my language, little miss." Lily giggled, delighted to be included in adult conversation. Margaret smiled at the interaction, then excused herself, promising to call on them soon. As they continued toward Lucas's cabin, Lily between them holding both their hands, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was what she had dreamed of during the long, lonely years of exile, not just vindication, but family. A place to belong, people to love who loved her in return. Lucas's cabin, modest though it was, felt like home the moment they stepped inside. Lily explored with the boundless curiosity of childhood, exclaiming over the books on the shelves, the photographs on the mantel, the small bedroom Lucas had prepared for her with a quilt borrowed from a neighbor, and a rag doll purchased specially for her arrival. "Is this really all for me?" she asked, wide-eyed, when Lucas showed her the room. "All for you, princess," he confirmed. "Though we might need to find a bigger place eventually, this cabin wasn't built with a family in mind." The word family hung in the air, full of promise. Hannah busied herself preparing dinner, her heart light despite the challenges that still lay ahead. They were together now, she, Lucas, and Lily. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. After dinner, as twilight softened the edges of the day, Lucas took Lily outside to see the stars emerging in the clear Wyoming sky. Hannah watched from the doorway as he lifted their daughter onto his shoulders, pointing out constellations and telling her stories about each one. Lily's delighted laughter carried on the evening breeze, a sound sweeter than any music. Later, after Lily had been tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Hannah and Lucas sat before the hearth, the dancing flames casting a warm glow over them both. "She's extraordinary," Lucas said softly. "You've done an amazing job raising her, Hannah." "It wasn't easy," Hannah admitted. "There were times I didn't know how we would survive the winter, times I feared illness would take her, times I wondered if I was doing the right thing by keeping her heritage a secret." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "But I never regretted her, not for a single moment." "Nor do I," Lucas assured her, reaching for her hand. "I only regret the years I missed." They sat in companionable silence for a time, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of Lily's breathing from the adjacent room. "What happens now?" Hannah asked eventually. "With us, I mean." Lucas turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "What do you want to happen, Hannah?" She considered the question carefully. "I want Lily to have the family she deserves. I want to build a life here if that's possible, and I want—" She hesitated, summoning her courage. "I want to explore what remains between us, Lucas. To see if the feelings we once shared can grow into something real, something lasting." Lucas's smile was slow and warm. "I want that too." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I've never stopped loving you, Hannah, not for a single day in all these years." Even when you believed I had been unfaithful to Lloyd, she asked, needing to know. Even then, he admitted. I told myself it was wrong, that I should forget you, but my heart wouldn't listen. When you walked into my office 3 days ago, it was as if all the years between us simply fell away. Hannah moved closer to him, drawn by the sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes. I tried to forget you too, she confessed. For Lily's sake, for my own sanity. But every time I looked at her, I saw you. Your spirit, your determination, your goodness. Lucas reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. We've been given a second chance, Hannah. A chance to be the family we should have been from the beginning. I don't intend to waste it. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a reacquaintance after years apart. Then, as Hannah responded, it deepened, carrying the weight of all they had lost and all they hoped to regain. When they finally parted, Hannah rested her forehead against his, her heart full to bursting. I never thought I would find this again, she whispered. Happiness, hope, a future worth fighting for. You'll never have to fight alone again, Lucas promised. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As if to underscore his words, a soft sound from the doorway drew their attention. Lily stood there in her nightgown, her golden curls tousled from sleep, her blue eyes wide. I had a dream, she said, her voice small, about the bad man. Lucas was on his feet immediately, crossing to lift her into his arms. What bad man, princess? The one who made Mama sad, Lily explained, nestling against his chest. The one who said mean things that weren't true. Hannah joined them, stroking her daughter's hair. That was just a dream, sweetheart. No one is going to make Mama sad anymore. Promise? Lily asked, looking between them. Promise, Lucas assured her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Your papa is here now, and I'll protect both you and your mama. Always. Lily seemed satisfied with this, her small body relaxing in his arms. Can I sleep with you tonight, Mama? Just this once? Hannah hesitated, glancing at Lucas. Well, sweetheart, this is Papa's house, and of course you can, Lucas interrupted gently. You can sleep in my big bed with your mama, and I'll take the spare room for tonight. How does that sound? Lily's smile was radiant. Thank you, Papa. As Lucas carried Lily to his bedroom, Hannah following behind, he caught Hannah's eye over their daughter's head. The look they shared was one of perfect understanding. This was just the beginning of their journey together. But already, they were finding their rhythm as parents, as partners, as a family reunited against all odds. Later, as Hannah lay with Lily curled against her, listening to her daughter's even breathing, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 3 weeks ago, she had been a struggling seamstress in Laramie, scraping together a living for herself and Lily, carrying the burden of Lloyd's lies like a stone around her neck. Now, she was vindicated, her name cleared, her daughter reunited with her father, and her heart opening to the possibility of love once more. The road ahead would not be without challenges. There would be those in Timber Creek who would never fully accept her return or the circumstances of Lily's birth. Lloyd, though publicly contrite, remained a powerful man with resources and influence. And she and Lucas had years of separation to bridge, differences to reconcile, a relationship to rebuild. But for the first time in 6 years, Hannah faced the future not with dread but with hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together, she, Lucas, and the daughter who united them. Not as fugitives from the past, but as architects of their own destiny. As sleep claimed her, Hannah's last thought was of Lucas, keeping watch in the room across the hall, the man who had never stopped loving her, the father who had embraced his daughter without hesitation or reservation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to be made. But tonight, at last, Hannah Winters was at peace. 5 years had passed since Hannah's return to Timber Creek. 5 years of healing, of growth, of building a life she had once thought forever beyond her reach. The small house at the edge of town that Lucas had purchased shortly after Lily's arrival had expanded with the addition of 2 rooms, necessary accommodations for their growing family. 2-year-old James Reed toddled across the front yard, chasing a butterfly with determined concentration, while his father mended a fence nearby, glancing up occasionally to ensure the boy didn't wander too far. Hannah watched from the porch, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their 3rd child grew stronger each day. At 10, Lily was the image of Hannah at that age, save for her father's blue eyes and confident bearing. She sat on the porch steps, reading aloud from one of her schoolbooks, her voice clear and steady. "Mama, is it true that the railroad might come all the way to Timber Creek next year?" Lily asked, looking up from her book. Hannah nodded, lowering herself carefully into the rocking chair Lucas had built for her after James was born. "That's what your father says. The town council approved the proposal last month." "Will it change things very much?" Lily wondered, setting aside her book. "Some things," Hannah acknowledged. "There will be new people, new businesses. The town will grow." "But not the important things," Lucas added, coming up from the yard with James on his shoulders. "The important things stay the same no matter what." "Like family," Lily said with the wisdom of a child who had learned early the value of what she had. "Exactly like family," Lucas agreed, setting James down to run to his mother. Hannah gathered the toddler into her lap, marveling as always at his solid weight, his sturdy little body, the dark hair that matched his father's. James had been born almost exactly 9 months after her wedding to Lucas, a joyful celebration attended by the entire town, including Judge Reed, who had traveled from Cheyenne to officiate the ceremony himself. Lloyd Winters had not attended, of course. True to the gossip Margaret Wilson had reported, he had sold his holdings in Timber Creek and moved east, settling in Boston where, it was rumored, he had remarried a wealthy widow with connections to the railroad industry. His shadow no longer fell across Hannah's life, though occasionally his name would surface in conversation, a reminder of darker days now firmly in the past. Lucas settled on the porch step beside Lily, his arm around her shoulders. At 36, he was in his prime, still Marshal of Timber Creek, though there was talk of him running for mayor in the next election. The silver threading through his hair at the temples only added to his distinguished appearance, and the lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of a man who smiled often and laughed freely. "Sheriff Douglas rode in from the county seat this morning," he mentioned, reaching up to take Hannah's free hand. "Says the governor might visit next month for the groundbreaking ceremony." "The governor?" Lily's eyes widened. "Will I get to meet him?" "I don't see why not," Lucas replied, his eyes twinkling. "Especially since your grandfather will be riding in with him. Judge Reed still has the governor's ear on most matters." Lily beamed with pride. Her relationship with her grandfather had blossomed over the years, with regular visits to Cheyenne and lengthy correspondence between them. Judge Reed doted on all his grandchildren, but Lily held a special place in his heart, the first grandchild, the one who had brought his son and Hannah together after years of separation. "Will the baby be here by then?" Lily asked, glancing at her mother's rounded belly. "Not for another 2 months," Hannah replied, running a hand over the swell of new life within her. "Though this one seems eager to meet the world, kicking and turning day and night." Lucas's eyes softened as he watched her, love and wonder evident in his expression. Even after years of marriage, moments like these still caught him by surprise. The sight of Hannah, radiant in motherhood; Lily, growing into a young woman with intelligence and compassion; James, sturdy and curious, exploring his world with fearless determination. A family. His family. "Papa, can we ride out to the creek tomorrow?" Lily asked, interrupting his reverie. "You promised to teach me to fish before summer's end." "So I did," Lucas agreed, "if your mother can spare us for the afternoon." Hannah smiled. "I think we can manage without you for a few hours. Mrs. Wilson is bringing her new granddaughter to visit anyway." Margaret Wilson had become Hannah's closest friend in the years since her return to Timber Creek. The doctor's wife had been one of the first to welcome Hannah back into the community, and her support had paved the way for others to follow suit. Now, as a grandmother for the first time, Margaret spent much of her time doting on her daughter's infant, sharing knowing looks with Hannah about the swift passage of time. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their yard, Lucas rose to light the lamps inside. James, growing sleepy, nestled against Hannah's chest, his small hand patting her belly as if greeting the sibling he would soon meet. Lily gathered her books, ever the responsible eldest child, and prepared for the evening routine of supper, stories, and bed. Hannah remained on the porch a moment longer, watching the last light fade from the western sky. 5 years ago, she had returned to Timber Creek seeking justice, carrying the burden of false accusations and years of hardship. She had found not only vindication but love, family, community, a life richer and more fulfilling than she had dared to imagine possible. The girl who had fled Timber Creek in disgrace no longer existed. In her place stood Hannah Reed, wife, mother, respected member of the community. The past had not been erased, it had been redeemed, transformed from a story of shame into one of courage, perseverance, and ultimately, triumph. As she rose to join her family inside, Hannah felt the baby shift within her, a reminder of the future still unfolding. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, she would face them with Lucas beside her, with Lily and James and this new little one to love and protect. Not alone, never again alone, but surrounded by the family she had fought so hard to claim. The truth that had once shaken Timber Creek to its core had, in time, become the foundation upon which they had built a life of joy, of purpose, of abiding love. And for Hannah Reed, that was more than enough. It was everything.